I still remember the morning sun streaming through the curtains when I first suspected something was amiss. My wife, Catherine, had been awake before me, busily typing on her phone with a curious smile. It wasn't unusual for her to text friends, especially since her birthday was coming up, but this time felt different. Her laugh was subdued, as though meant to be concealed, and when I approached, she locked her screen. I tried to brush it off as a surprise plan for her special day. Little did I know, that fleeting moment would shatter everything I believed about us. Days passed, and the tension between us simmered beneath the surface. Her phone seemed attached to her hand, yet she grew distant in conversations, offering rehearsed answers. I wondered if I was just overthinking, especially since she'd always taken pride in maintaining a wide social circle. Still, I noticed little changes: the way she'd leave the room to take calls, the sudden hush whenever I walked in, and the surge of messages late at night. Every time I tried to gently inquire, she'd dismiss me with a disarming grin, insisting everything was fine. Deep down, though, my instincts bristled fiercely. When her birthday finally arrived, the atmosphere felt forced. I'd spent weeks planning a modest party, inviting close friends and family, but Catherine seemed distracted, eyes continually flicking to her phone. She drifted through the festivities, delivering polite smiles and half-hearted thanks for gifts she barely acknowledged. Everyone congratulated me on arranging a lovely celebration, but my gut churned with unease. I couldn't help noticing how she jumped at every notification, retreating to secluded corners whenever possible. The laughter and clinking glasses around us contrasted sharply with my own fear that a silent, destructive secret lingered just beyond my grasp. That evening, after the guests departed, I prepared a special dinner for her. Candlelight flickered across our plates, casting shadows that danced on the walls. We toasted to another year of life, yet I couldn't shake the coldness in her voice. She picked at her food, hardly tasting it. I attempted small talk, reminiscing about our early days together, hoping to reignite some spark. But her thoughts were elsewhere, eyes distant, mind drifting. An insistent vibration rattled her phone against the table, making her flinch. She refused to answer in front of me, and then I knew something was wrong. As soon as she excused herself, phone clutched in hand, my resolve hardened. I crept quietly down the hallway, straining to hear her muffled whispers. The conversation was brief, punctuated by short, nervous laughs and urgent tones. When she emerged, I pretended I'd been in the bathroom, plastering a neutral expression on my face. Inside, my heart hammered. I tried to recall any clue I'd missed, any hint of a relationship gone awry. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but this felt different. Betrayal's shadow was creeping toward me, and I was determined not to be blindsided. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every odd detail in my head. Catherine seemed restless too, tossing and turning before finally slipping out of bed. I heard her footsteps padding down the hallway and the soft beep of her phone unlocking. For a moment, I considered confronting her right then, demanding answers. But the fear of what I might discover paralyzed me. Instead, I waited until morning, hoping some clarity might surface with daylight. Little did I know, the deeper I dug, the darker the truth would become, and the more painful to confront. I decided to start by checking our phone bill. She typically handled such tasks, but I claimed I needed to review our family plan. Sure enough, I found a new number appearing repeatedly, often at odd hours. It wasn't a friend or colleague I recognized, and the frequency of calls was staggering. My stomach clenched. Still, I tried to maintain composure, reminding myself that there could be an innocent explanation. Perhaps it was a coworker discussing an urgent project, or a friend in crisis. But my instincts screamed otherwise, pushing me to keep digging for proof. I began to watch her more closely. Whenever that number lit up her screen, she'd leave the room, speaking in hushed tones. She laughed more than she laughed with me lately, and seemed invigorated afterward. I struggled to remain calm and collected, unwilling to let her see the paranoia gnawing at me. An idea formed in my mind: if she was brazen enough to cheat, perhaps she wouldn't be too careful about where she left her phone. Late one evening, while she showered, I seized my chance. I powered on her device, determined to see if my suspicions were valid. My hands trembled as I navigated her messaging app. The name attached to that suspicious number was Tracy, a woman's name that could easily mask the identity of someone else. I scanned through texts, discovering messages that were far from platonic. They arranged secret lunches, discussed missed kisses, and planned intimate rendezvous. My eyes burned with each new line, as though the words themselves were branded on my mind. Even seeing the name, Tracy, felt like a sick joke. I scrolled further back, discovering that this wasn't a recent affair. It had been going on for months, hidden behind sweet lies. The water in the bathroom turned off, and panic seized me. I quickly exited the app, setting her phone exactly where she'd left it. My heart hammered so loudly I feared she'd hear it through the door. I rushed back to bed, feigning sleep, though my chest heaved with grief and rage. Seconds later, she slipped under the covers, smelling of soap and shampoo. In the darkness, I forced myself to remain still, eyes closed, mind churning with possibilities. The evidence was damning. My wife was cheating, and I was now bearing the horrific burden of undeniable proof. In the days that followed, I wrestled with a surge of conflicting emotions. Fury threatened to consume me, but I also felt profoundly hurt, betrayed by the person I'd trusted most. There was a raw ache in my chest whenever I looked at her. She carried on as though nothing had changed, unaware that I knew. I noticed the fresh glow in her cheeks after every secret text, the small smiles she tried to hide. My mind spun with questions. Why had she turned to someone else? Was our life so lacking that she sought excitement in another's arms? I felt a desperate need for revenge, something to match the pain she'd inflicted. Yet, a part of me remembered the woman I once loved, the one who'd stand by my side through laughter and tears. How had we come to this? I debated confronting her outright, forcing her to confess. But a plan began to crystallize, a more calculated approach. If she thought she could play me for a fool, I would show her just how thoroughly I could unravel her illusions. My rage demanded satisfaction, but it also demanded strategy. I vowed her downfall would be spectacular. First, I needed to confirm the identity of this so-called Tracy. There was a certain cunning required to peel away the layers of deceit. I started by searching the number online, hoping it might yield a name or social media profile. Nothing obvious appeared, but I remained undeterred. Next, I purchased a cheap disposable phone, sending a text under the guise of an old friend who'd changed numbers. The response was cautious at first, until I baited them with a few personal details gleaned from Catherine's messages. Before long, Tracy revealed himself to be a man named Damien. Reading his flirty replies, thick with implication, made my stomach twist. He had no idea who I really was. His confidence dripped from every word, as though he relished seducing another man's wife. My fury threatened to boil over, but I kept calm, continuing our little charade. I learned he worked at a nearby gym as a personal trainer. His photos, when I finally found them, showcased bulging muscles, a smug grin, and arms wrapped around various women who appeared enchanted by his brawny physique. I felt disgust rising within me, fueling my determination to bring him crashing down. Catherine's birthday had been the turning point, but I decided it would also be the stage for their downfall. It struck me that the entire affair might have been heightened around her special day. That knowledge both repulsed me and strengthened my resolve. If I had been willing to throw her a party, shower her with love, only to be betrayed, would now channel that same effort into orchestrating a legendary revenge. My plan would require time and resources, along with a certain willingness to cast aside my own moral hesitations. The betrayal demanded a potent reckoning. In the meantime, I feigned normalcy, playing the doting husband to avoid suspicion. I told Catherine I'd been swamped with work, explaining my occasional late returns. In truth, I was scoping out Damien's gym, noting his schedule, even spotting the car he drove. He'd never met me, and I kept my distance, but watching him from afar filled me with a strange sense of purpose. I wanted to see the man who'd stolen my wife's loyalty. He strolled about the gym like a peacock, puffed chest and flashing smiles, collecting admirers wherever he went. My anger simmered, waiting to explode. Though part of me yearned to march in and confront him with fists raised, I realized it would be too simple. It wouldn't address the root betrayal, Catherine's betrayal. She had been the one to break our vows, to lie to my face and live a double life. She deserved to face the consequences of her deception. Yet I wanted them both to understand the devastation they caused. My revenge needed to be cunning, not just for my own satisfaction, but to expose their actions publicly. I refused to let them slink away without retribution or the humiliation they deserved. I decided to use Catherine's upcoming work conference to my advantage. She'd be out of town for 2 nights, something she'd casually mentioned weeks before. My guess was she planned to meet Damien while away. The timing felt perfect. While she was distracted, I could lay the groundwork for a dramatic reveal. I enlisted the help of a discreet investigator, a former acquaintance who owed me a favor. He specialized in digital forensics and covert surveillance, promising me photographic evidence I could present at just the right moment. It felt ruthless, but so was her duplicity. For 2 days, I barely slept, consumed by the logistics of my plan. I compiled every incriminating text, photo, and detail into a hidden folder, ensuring I had backups in multiple locations. My investigator tracked Catherine's movements at her hotel, capturing her rendezvous with Damien in a series of damning images. The final photo was a dagger to my heart, her lips locked with his in the lobby elevator, oblivious to the cameras. That picture alone was enough to annihilate the image of our marriage. But I needed more, a complete dossier that would leave no doubt of their betrayal. When she returned, Catherine waltzed in as though everything were normal, wearing the same wedding ring she desecrated every time she touched him. I tried not to recoil. My gut burned with anger, yet I forced a welcoming smile, asking politely about her conference. She spewed the usual details, mentioning workshops and seminars I knew she never attended. I feigned interest, applauding her professional dedication. Inwardly, I was counting the hours until I could set my final plan into motion. She had no clue the ground beneath her was about to collapse, nor how thoroughly I intended to orchestrate it. I knew her birthday celebration had been overshadowed by her affair. Yet the memory of her last birthday, when I suspected nothing, gnawed at me. The difference was stark. This year, I would give her a belated celebration she'd never forget. I arranged a gathering at a classy lounge, inviting friends, family, and her colleagues. She assumed it was my way of making up for the tension at her initial birthday party. Little did she know, the entire event was a carefully designed trap. I wanted every important person in her life to be there when I revealed who she truly was. On the night of the party, Catherine seemed genuinely touched. She arrived dressed in a stunning black gown, greeting guests with warm hugs. For a fleeting moment, I saw the woman I fell in love with, beaming and gracious. But I reminded myself of her secrets, letting the memory of that elevator photo reignite my fury. While she mingled, I slipped away to ensure everything was in place. The plan was intricate. At the stroke of a certain hour, images and messages would appear on a large screen. Simultaneously, a man with an envelope of photos would walk in, delivering proof. Catherine was oblivious, laughing with her friends when the lights dimmed. Soft music ended abruptly, replaced by the hum of a projector. She glanced around, confused. Then I stepped onto a small stage, microphone in hand. My heart pounded, but I steadied myself, scanning the crowd of concerned faces. I began by thanking everyone for coming, praising Catherine's virtues as a wife, partner, and friend. She blushed at the compliments, likely believing this was a romantic tribute. Then I signaled the projector, and the first incriminating text appeared on the screen, huge and undeniable, for everyone to see. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face went pale, her jaw tightening. Before she could speak, more messages filled the screen, each worse than the last. Gasps of disbelief echoed. People glanced at her in confusion and horror. I pressed onward, revealing photos of her and Damien, arms wrapped around each other, kissing in that elevator. The room erupted in scattered cries of outrage and pity. Catherine stumbled forward, tears welling in her eyes, attempting to reach the stage. I stepped back, letting the slideshow run its grim course. Each image hammered the truth deeper into everyone's minds. She begged me to stop, voice trembling. But I refused, continuing my monologue. I spoke of betrayal, of trusting someone with your heart only to have them shatter it. The crowd watched, transfixed, as Catherine collapsed to her knees. I had never seen her so broken. A pang of guilt flickered inside me, but the pain she'd caused fueled my resolve. Guests whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others glared at Catherine, feeling betrayed on my behalf. This was the moment I'd waited for. Her mask was ripped away, her reputation destroyed before every meaningful connection she had. Just when she thought the ordeal was over, I gave a nod to the doorman. In walked Damien, looking smug and expecting a private rendezvous with Catherine after my celebration. He froze at the sight of the stunned crowd and the screen showcasing his face locked in a passionate kiss with my wife. There was a stunned hush, then furious whispers. He turned to flee, but a pair of security guards blocked his exit. I approached him calmly, microphone still in hand. In a firm, clear voice, I introduced him to everyone as the man who'd invaded my marriage. Damien tried to stammer out an excuse, but no one would hear it. The evidence on the screen was irrefutable. Catherine wept, begging forgiveness she would never receive. My wife's family looked on in horror, some comforting each other, others glaring at her with disgust. Her closest friend gasped in disbelief, tears streaming down her cheeks. Catherine attempted to rush into the arms of her mother, but her mother turned away, sickened by her daughter's betrayal. The humiliation in that room was palpable, every moment thick with tension. My revenge had unfolded exactly as I'd planned, and there was no escape. Through the microphone, I informed everyone that our marriage was over. I announced I'd be filing for divorce immediately, citing the incontrovertible proof of adultery. Catherine sobbed, reaching for me, but I recoiled. The fury pulsing through me was too intense, and I refused to offer her any comfort. She sank to the floor, mascara streaking her cheeks. Damien stood helplessly, pinned by a sea of hostile glares. I turned my back on them both, hearing the outraged murmurs grow louder. My heart pounded with a strange mixture of triumph and heartbreak. I had loved her once, but that love died. Some might call my actions cruel, but I felt justified. She had lied to me, twisting our vows into a mockery. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her deceit, to understand that I was not a man who would simply fade into the background. The lounge crackled with shocked energy as I set down the microphone. I walked out, ignoring Catherine's desperate pleas. Outside, the cool night air brushed my face, offering a momentary sense of relief. My pulse raced, yet a strange calm settled over me. I had orchestrated the perfect revenge, and there was no going back. In the following days, word of the scandal spread quickly. Social media buzzed with rumors, though I never chimed in publicly. Catherine retreated to a friend's house, her entire world seemingly collapsed. Damien was fired from his job, once his boss discovered the notorious spectacle. Clients cancelled on him, and his once glamorous social media presence turned into an arena for hateful comments. Exactly as I'd intended, their reputations were in tatters. Meanwhile, I began the painful process of untying the knots of our shared life. Lawyers, paperwork, and bank accounts dominated my schedule, reminding me that betrayal carried a steep price. At night, I wrestled with conflicting emotions, wondering if my vengeance had gone too far. Part of me recalled the warm memories we'd created over the years, the laughter we'd shared before everything soured. But then I'd recall her deceitful texts, her shameless kisses with another man, and the resentment reignited. I told myself I did what needed to be done, that I'd only mirrored her cruelty in a more public form. And still, a hollow ache lingered where my love for her had once thrived. I tried to fill it with pride at my cunning, but emptiness crept in. Catherine tried calling me multiple times, likely to apologize or plead for sympathy. I never answered. Instead, I let my lawyer convey the necessary communications. The separation proceedings were swift, the evidence of infidelity overwhelming. She lost nearly everything in the settlement, including the respect of her closest friends. I wasn't interested in financial ruin alone, I wanted her to see the wreckage she'd caused in our lives. Any attempt to contact me was blocked, and any letters she wrote went unread. My heart felt battered, and I couldn't bear to let her twist my emotions again. Strangely enough, a few acquaintances accused me of being too vindictive. They claimed I could have handled it privately, sparing her public shame. Yet those people didn't know the depth of my heartbreak, the nights I lay awake feeling like my soul had been ripped apart. They didn't see how Catherine mocked our marriage with every sly text, every clandestine meeting, every touch she bestowed on another man. I refused to feel guilty for exposing a truth she willingly created. My revenge might have been extreme, but it was honest, a reflection of the agony she imposed upon me. In the months that followed, my life shifted dramatically. The divorce was finalized, and I moved into a smaller apartment. It was humbling, living alone for the first time in years, surrounded by the ghosts of my past. But slowly, I regained a sense of self. I found solace in therapy, acknowledging that bitterness could consume me if I didn't process my pain. The therapist listened without judgment as I recounted every step of my revenge, the twisted sense of satisfaction, and the lingering sorrow that refused to fade. He helped me recognize my humanity beneath the fury. Family and friends offered their support, helping me box up memories of a failed marriage. There were photos, wedding gifts, and keepsakes I couldn't bear to look at. I gave most of them away or tossed them, unwilling to let the past haunt me. Some nights, I dreamed of simpler times, imagining Catherine smiling at me with genuine affection. But each morning brought the reminder of her betrayal, and the reality that any affection she once had been supplanted by deceit. Letting go was a battle, one I fought fiercely, determined to find some peace in the aftermath. Damien, on the other hand, disappeared from town. Rumors suggested he moved states, desperately seeking a fresh start. The public humiliation he endured at that party haunted him wherever he went, thanks to videos that circulated. He became the poster child for infidelity, a cautionary tale. Strangely, I felt no remorse. The man had flaunted my wife on his arm, daring fate to punish him. Fate did more than I could have hoped for. In truth, I never cared about him as much as I cared about Catherine's choices. She was the one who'd said, "I do," only to spit on her vow. Ironically, Catherine's mother contacted me, apologizing for her daughter's actions. She expressed her own devastation and admitted she couldn't bear to speak with Catherine. I felt a pang of sympathy. Parents can't always control their children's decisions, and it wasn't her fault. We had a civil conversation, both acknowledging that the woman we thought we knew was gone. It was a bittersweet moment, comforting to hear I wasn't alone in my sense of loss, but heartbreaking to accept how many lives had been damaged. She wished me well, promising to respect my need for distance from Catherine's side of the family. I tried dating again after a while, though my heart remained guarded. Friends introduced me to kind, genuine women, but I struggled to trust. Every time a phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety, recalling Catherine's secret texts. My revenge had achieved its purpose, but it hadn't wiped the slate clean of trauma. Slowly, with each new encounter, I learned to separate the past from the present. Not every new person was destined to betray me. Love could still bloom, albeit tentatively, in a heart that had been so thoroughly crushed. Yet the scars remained, and I carried them. After a year, I discovered a measure of peace. My job was stable, and I'd found hobbies that revived my spirit: hiking, photography, and volunteer work at a local shelter. Focusing on small acts of kindness helped me rebuild trust in humanity. People could be cruel, but they could also be compassionate, nurturing, and selfless. I embraced that duality, determined never to let bitterness define me. I'd done what I felt was necessary to address Catherine's betrayal, and life had moved on. Eventually, the raw edges of my revenge dulled, replaced by a resigned acceptance of what had transpired. Sometimes, in my quieter moments, I questioned whether there was a gentler path I could have taken. Perhaps a private confrontation, or a simpler divorce, might have spared me the burden of orchestrating such dramatic exposure. But then I'd remember the lies, the nights she spent with Damien while I lay awake, the cruel duplicity hidden behind her birthday celebrations. A wave of justified anger always followed. I'd remind myself that I was pushed to the brink. In a twisted way, my revenge was the closure I needed, drawing a definitive line between what was and what would never be again. Word of my legendary revenge eventually faded into rumor. New scandals replaced ours, and time has a way of dulling even the sharpest gossip. Yet among those who witnessed that night, it remained etched in their memories. People still spoke in hushed tones about the moment the screen lit up with pictures of Catherine's affair. Some even congratulated me on my audacity, while others pitied my pain. Life continued, and I reclaimed what remained of my dignity. Catherine's name scarcely passed my lips, and if anyone brought her up, I'd merely shrug. I had no desire to revisit that wound. I learned that Catherine moved to another city, likely trying to outrun the wreckage of her reputation. Perhaps she found another companion who didn't know her history, or maybe she lived alone, haunted by her choices. I never reached out, never sought to discover more. She was a chapter in my story now closed, her memory banished to the realm of lessons learned. I refused to let her presence linger in my thoughts or hamper my future. The mere mention of her name reminded me of broken trust, a cautionary reminder that even those closest to you can betray. As time went on, my own life blossomed again. I found someone new, a woman named Serena, whose empathy and honesty soothed my weary soul. Early in our relationship, I told her about my past, sparing no detail about the infamous revenge. She listened without judgment, holding my hand as I recounted the hurt. That was the moment I understood I could find love again, one built on honesty rather than illusions. Serena and I took things slowly, respecting the scars I bore. Over months of steady companionship, I felt my guarded heart begin to open, hesitantly but resolutely. Eventually, I realized that while my revenge had been epic, it wasn't the most important chapter of my life. It was a turning point, forcing me to confront pain, channel anger, and emerge transformed. Perhaps it was necessary for me to shatter everything so I could rebuild. With Serena's patience, I learned that trust could heal when given the proper care. I still kept certain protective walls, but I allowed gentle cracks in them, letting light shine through. The memory of Catherine's betrayal and the vengeance I enacted served as cautionary tales, reminders of what I never wanted to repeat. I wouldn't say I regret my actions, for they were a response to a grievous wrong. Yet I've come to see revenge as a double-edged sword, powerful and destructive in equal measure. It provided a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but it didn't undo the original wound. Healing only began when I focused on myself, acknowledged my pain, and allowed love back into my life. In time, the bitterness waned, replaced by gratitude for the chance to start anew. I came to understand that though Catherine broke her vows, I refused to let her break my capacity to believe in love. When memories of that fateful birthday resurface, I no longer feel the sharp sting of betrayal. Instead, I recall it as the day I discovered my own strength. I faced heartbreak, confronted deceit, and orchestrated a public reckoning that people still talk about. In the end, I survived, forging a new path that led me to someone who cherished me genuinely. My legendary revenge might remain the dramatic highlight of a painful chapter, but it's not the final word in my story. That word belongs to my resilience, my capacity to rebuild, and my determination to never again settle for half-truths. Sometimes I imagine how Catherine might reflect on everything that happened. Does she regret hurting me, or does she only regret being caught? I'll never know, and I've learned not to dwell on those questions. Damien, too, became little more than a footnote, a catalyst for chaos. My real battle was always with my own disillusionment and heartbreak. By triumphing over them, I won a more meaningful victory than any revenge plot could deliver. The affair and its exposure tested the limits of my resolve, but they also revealed just how strong I could be in the face of devastation. Each year on her birthday, I'm reminded of the time I discovered her cheating, how it set in motion events that destroyed one life and built another. I sometimes raise a glass privately, not in bitterness, but as a quiet salute to the journey that followed. Without that betrayal, I might never have confronted my own depths or discovered my capacity for rebirth. Life's cruelest twists often grant us unexpected gifts. Mine was the strength to purge deceit from my life and open myself to a more authentic future. In that sense, I found a sliver of gratitude in the ashes. Even now, I recall the hush that fell over the lounge when the projector revealed her darkest secret. The raw shock on her face, the outraged murmurs in the crowd, and the moment Damien walked in, sealing their fate. It plays like a movie in my mind, a surreal memory both exhilarating and agonizing. Sometimes, I see it as a cautionary tale. The cost of betrayal can be unimaginably high. Other times, I see it as a testament to how far I was willing to go to protect my dignity. Either way, it's part of me, woven into the tapestry of my life. My new relationship flourished. Serena and I traveled, building memories that rested on trust and transparent communication. She celebrated my small achievements and comforted me on my rough days, patiently undoing the knots of trauma I still carried. We laughed more than I'd ever laughed with Catherine, a genuine, unguarded laughter. Eventually, I felt safe enough to let the last remnants of resentment slip away. Love, I learned, can sometimes arise stronger after surviving a storm. And I had endured quite the tempest. My heart remained cautious, but it no longer clenched in fear every time her phone buzzed. There was a moment, during a lazy Sunday afternoon, when I realized I hadn't thought about Catherine or Damien in weeks. The sharp memories had dulled, overshadowed by daily joys, cooking dinner together, watching sunsets, planning future goals. I paused, reflecting on how distant that painful saga now felt. I once believed my revenge would define me forever, but it turned out to be just one milestone on my path. Life had moved on, and in that precious calm, I found a profound sense of release. The weight of bitterness lifted, replaced by an open sky of possibility. I confessed to Serena that a part of me was ashamed of how public and merciless my revenge had been. She listened kindly, then told me I'd done what I felt necessary in that moment. She reminded me that we all make choices under duress that reveal both our darkest anger and our fiercest desire for justice. Her unwavering support helped me forgive myself for any cruelty I'd inflicted. Though I still believed Catherine earned her humiliation, the intensity of my vengeance sometimes startled me in hindsight. Yet that's what betrayal can do, awaken a wrath we never imagined resided within us. Over time, I rebuilt friendships I'd neglected during my turmoil. Many had supported me, even if they were initially shocked by the scale of my revenge. We shared laughs, replaced old memories with new experiences, and I was grateful they stood by me. People are fallible, but they can also be incredibly loyal when they see genuine pain. As my circle of support strengthened, I realized I wasn't alone, nor was I defined by what had happened. Though the scars remained, I took comfort in the loyalty of friends who saw beyond the betrayal's drama and recognized my true self. Eventually, I reached a point where I could retell the story with a hint of detachment. It became an anecdote about the extremes of human emotion, a demonstration of how deeply one can be wounded and how spectacularly one might retaliate. But I always emphasized the lesson learned, that healing ultimately requires more than retribution. It demands introspection, compassion, for oneself, primarily, and the willingness to move beyond the primal hunger for revenge. My legendary act was a spark in time, but growth was the long burn that followed, guiding me toward genuine recovery and the promise of healthier love. Life's full of unexpected forks in the road. Catherine's betrayal was mine, a twisting path that led me through the darkness of rage and heartbreak. Yet from that darkness, I emerged with renewed conviction. I discovered that I could endure the unimaginable and still seek the light. My legendary revenge may forever remain a cautionary tale or an object of morbid fascination, but for me, it's a chapter concluded. I live each day with the quiet certainty that I survived and, in many ways, triumphed. That knowledge sustains me, reminding me that the greatest power lies in self-restoration. Walking away from that final confrontation was like stepping into a void. I felt shattered, yet I also sensed a strange liberation. Breaking free from Catherine's lies opened a door to authenticity. Yes, I chose a dramatic and brutal reveal, ensuring the world saw her treachery. But in so doing, I claimed my narrative back. No longer was I the clueless husband in the dark, passively betrayed. I was the architect of my own closure, ensuring no one doubted the truth. It was a stark choice with stark repercussions, yet it also laid the foundation for my ultimate renewal. I won't pretend the journey after that spectacle was easy. The anger, sorrow, and confusion had to be processed day by day. Yet with every step, I felt lighter. I remained determined to forge something meaningful from the wreckage. And I did. From the debris of a failed marriage, I built a sturdier life, grounded in values I refused to compromise again. If I ever sensed deception in a new partner, I promised myself I would address it openly, before resentment festered. My legendary revenge was the final boundary I drew, declaring I would never again endure such betrayal in silence. Reflecting on everything, I'm at peace with my choices. If Catherine ever tried to reach out or apologize, I have no idea what I'd say. Perhaps I'd find it in me to forgive, if only for my own well-being, but I doubt we'd ever speak as friends. Some fractures can't be mended. And that's all right. Life's tapestry includes threads of loss and heartbreak. Mine also contains a thread of rage turned to revenge, woven alongside threads of healing and hope. In the end, the whole picture is what matters, and I'm content with the design that's taken shape. I caught my wife cheating on her birthday. My revenge was legendary, a public unmasking that left her broken in front of everyone she knew. But it was also the beginning of my evolution, pushing me to rediscover my worth and define my future on my own terms. Those who learned of my act either condemned me or hailed me as a hero for scorned spouses everywhere. In truth, I was just a man in pain, lashing out with theatrical fury. And from that storm of fury, I found my path forward, forging a life built on honesty, respect, and hope.